Have you ever been on an engagement and you've tested everything you could possibly test? Your login endpoint, your forgot password endpoint, maybe even the registration endpoint, and all you could find are low to medium vulnerabilities. Here is one attack path most hunters skip before moving on to the next target, which is analyzing the GS files. In this video, I'm going to be showing you why GS files are an absolute gold mine, why you should never skip them, and when you're stuck on an engagement, why GS files are almost what are hiding the good stuff. We're going to be showing you what you can pull out of GS files and tools to use to extract all the GS files running on any particular web application you're testing. Let's jump in. What are GS files? GS files are plain text documents containing code that powers the interactive and dynamic behavior of any web application. Why do we care about GS files? Now, developers oftentimes, when they write a particular web application, they often leave secret keys, expose API endpoints, and even leak credentials in the application, which then gets pushed to production. Now, let's jump into our demo. For this particular application, um, we're going to be looking at how we can, get, we're going to be looking at how we can get, to start analyzing GS files from this application. So take, for example, this is a ginger juice shop, and it probably has different endpoints we could test. We can see product, we can see blog, our story. When we scroll down, we could see the different we could see the different product that's being sold on this application, right? But here is one way we could analyze GS file, which is inspecting the application and going to the dev tools. Yeah. So inspecting the application, going to the dev tools, and come right to the debugger. Now, right here, you could see it shows you. I need to bump this up a bit. Yeah. So right here, you could see it shows us the ginger juice shop, then the resources under the ginger juice shop. So if I drop down the resources under the ginger juice shop, so we can also see a folder called JS. Now, before I click on that folder, I'm also seeing another folder called footer/JS. So drop down that, let's click on the scan.me.js. Now, in the scan.me.js, you're probably seeing, let's copy source to URI and paste it here. So you're probably seeing a whole lot of things. So I just, copy and paste so we could, this was too tiny or this was too large. So here we could see that this contains, so this is the scan.me.js, right? And this is a JS file containing, different endpoints. If we analyze this, I could already see, /resource/images. Let's try to see if we could resolve to this. So /resource/images. Let's open it and let's duplicate this. Duplicate tab. So this is just to show us that, to see if this particular endpoint we find in this JS file exists. So here we can see it maps us to this, bottle. Maybe it's a wine bottle. I don't know, but what I'm trying to say here is that, upon analyzing this JS file, we would see that we get an endpoint to /images. Now, as part of our test, we could see if we could access. Okay, so we couldn't access the /images. We just see if we could access maybe /images to show us maybe all the images that have been uploaded on this particular web application. But there are different things under our /resource. Now, I'm very sure if you analyze this file, we're going to see a whole lot of endpoints. Now, since we know the JS file, one of the one common um, since we know that one common file path here is maybe our slash resource, we can then do control F, then search for things like resource. No, then search for things like resource and maybe see how many of it we can find. We can search for things like API that doesn't exist. We can search for things like secret that doesn't exist. So this is let's jump back to analyzing our JS file. So you could also click the drop down menu here and you're seeing JS file. So in all these JS files, these are things that basically make up what is in this application. So if I click on Angular 1.77.js, this is another JS file. So let me copy URI. Let's paste it here. So you see, this is another JS file, and when we analyze it, we could potentially find, if the developers do not comment out some of the important details, maybe credentials that were used when building the application, or maybe default credentials can be one of them. API endpoints can be one of them. Hidden API endpoints in particular. So all we can do is just to search because it's bulky. Let's search for resource again. So we're seeing resource. Um, let's see how many appears, but we're not seeing like an API endpoint like we saw in the earlier JS files in particular. Everything we're seeing here is just resource. So let's do slash um, resource, no, slash API that can be found. Let's also do secret that can be found as well. So luckily the developer is not leaving, anything that maybe should implicate them, or maybe an exposed endpoint. I think the only headwind we got was when we analyzed the scan me.js and we found, these different resources. Yeah. Then another thing we could do is from our search bar here, we could just search for slash resources. So you see these maps, this, so let's cancel this two out. So you see it's not picking it from, say, a particular JS file. It's just going through the whole application, and anywhere slash resource appear, it brings that for us. So I'm majorly in the scan me. Yeah, that's where it appears. So we could also search here for secret. So we see here it says um um secret internal do not use, or else you'll be fired. Okay. We can also search for API, API, or slash API, since we are looking for like an API endpoint. API. Okay. Then we could also search for. So one important thing I just want to point out here is that you can actually, so when analyzing your JS files from this perspective, right, you could actually come here, check from your dev tools all the JS files that are present on the application. When you've mapped that out, you could literally search for sensitive information, maybe um, hidden endpoint that might be found, or you could search for um, um, leaked credentials, and things like that. So the main thing is, basically the main thing is um, we knowing how we could even start the JS files analysis, which is what we are seeing here. So this is like um the first demo on analyzing your JS file, right? So you come here, you can always, look through them. You can always look through them. You can always search for sensitive keywords and things like that. So let's see, we have 1 2 3 4 5. So in total we have 5 JS files that are present. All right, so 5 JS files that are present. And you know if there to be a proper engagement, we'll you know interact, search through the different JS files to see if we could, if there's like a potential stored sensitive information. Then we see how we can change that with other things we've also found when doing our reconnaissance for this particular engagement. That's demo one. I think so. Demo two is using our I want to so demo two is, let's bring this right here. Oh, I'm trying to bring my my terminal up here on this my board. Okay. So demo two is going to be yeah. So demo two is going to be we using tools like our wayback URL or get all URL, popularly known as GAL. The reason why we use this is because it tries to map all the um previous records of this application, previous, endpoint, maybe that have been up or alive before and like have been taken down. But basically, why we're using wayback URL and get all URLs is because we want to map out um from the internet. Right now we checked, from the application, and we found just 5 JS files. But what we are going to do next is we're going to check for the whole internet, right? The particular application, and see, what JS files have been stored, or what JS file can we find that's connected to that particular application on the internet. Now, one of the commands to run to do this is where's the first command? Yeah, so one of the commands to run is, so take note, we're using, so I think I should also show the two tools that we're using, which is gal and wayback URL. So for gal, so get all URLs. All right. So this is gal, in case you also want to install it. For people that are using Linux environment, you could install get all URLs. Then there's also wayback URLs. Um, so wayback URL, you could also use it to fetch, a list of URLs, on the internet, right? So, but let's go to our terminal. Um, let's go to our terminal. Let's zoom in. Okay. So, in analyzing this as well, one of the commands we could run is, since we know it is the ginger and juice shop. Okay, gin and juice shop. Right. So one command we can run is this. So what it's going to do is, it's going to get all URLs, is going to fetch or map out all JS files, fetch and map out all JS files connected to this particular application in question, and when it's done, it's going to, dump it for us, save it in a text file. Then we can now then analyze the text file to see, the different, JS files that are connected to the application, which also helps us, in our engagement. Because for an engagement, let's say for example, like I said earlier, for an engagement, like I said earlier, for an engagement, if you are stuck or you've explored everything you could possibly explore, one thing you should never miss out is exploring your JavaScript files. Because JavaScript files, trust me, contains a whole lot of juicy information. It contains a whole lot of, leaked credentials, exposed API endpoints, which you could then use to map your attack surface for that particular application. But if you're not analyzing your JS files, you would actually be missing a lot. So that's why analyzing our JS files is very, very important for every engagement, right? So let's jump back into this. So I think, yeah, it's done. Um, let's see how many um, txt. So we have nine. Again, we have nine lists. Okay, so we have scan me.js. I don't think we found this. Did we find this the last time? No, I don't think we found this. We have subscribe. See, we found subscribe now. XML stock check payload.js. Did we find that? I don't think we found that. But this is like a new JS file endpoint that we got. Okay, let's run the command for the wayback URLs, then we'll quickly analyze what we found on the, on Gal. So let's quickly do that. So, um, so let's see if we get different results from these two tools, right? So let's run that and copy this, open it up. Okay, so I don't think it gives us anything much. But let's analyze this again. So what we could find when we did this was the subscribe now.js. So subscribe now, Angular 1.77, React, scan me.js. But when we did this, what did we find? So search log.js, I don't think there was any search log.js. I don't think there was any stock check.js as well. So let's see. Okay. And this is basically what, I was trying to explain. Where And this is basically what I was trying to explain, where I said, you're running an engagement, and from the two demo we've just done now, we found 5 JS files when we analyzed the JS files from the um, dev tools. But now we are finding extra JS files upon using Gal and even wayback URL. Let's analyze. Let's see what comes back on wayback URL. So let's see what comes back on wayback URL. WB.js. So let's the um -L. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. -L, then WB.js. We also get 9 files back. WB.js. We also get 9 files back. All right. So I think both are the same. Yeah, but I think both are the same, and mm, so I think both are the same, and they are just, giving us maybe extra JS files that are not present here. All right. So on an engagement, you should never, move on too quickly when you're on an engagement, because you never know what JS files could just be holding the secret to a successful pen test, right? So let's move back to this. So done, we've checked using dev tools. So we've checked using dev tools. We've also checked using Wayback URL and Gal, and I think we can move on to. We've also checked using Wayback URL and Gal. So now I think we can move on to the next demo, which is we can move on to the next demo, which is using um what's that third tool we need to use. We can move on to the next one using Bob. Yeah. So Bob is also another good way. So for this third demo, I'm actually going to show you how you could use Bob Suite to actually, not just get the JS files, but also extract information from those JS files. So let's switch to Bob real quick. So in our Bob, let's minimize this. So in our Bob suite, there are two extensions you need to actually install. There are two extensions I use personally, in my own live engagement. So which is Sensitive Discoverer and Bob JS Link Finder. And I think, yeah, so I think we already got some from proxying the application. We already got, some JS files being returned. Here we could see the scan.js, we could see the Angular 1.77, the DOM, the React, the the yeah, Angular min.js map. I don't think we found this in the previous. I don't think we found this in the previous what's it called that we did analysis that we did. Does it have anything? Okay, it doesn't resolve anywhere. So you could also use JS Link Finder, right? You could also use JS Link Finder, and so what I do is that after I use JS Link Finder to map out all the you all the JS files, right? Then I use another tool called Sensitive Discover. So basically, let me explain the workflow to you. Let me explain the workflow to you. So basically, the workflow in my head is that I use Bob link. So basically, the workflow is that I use the Bob JS link finder to map out all the JS files on the application. All right. Then I use the sensitive discoverer. So sensitive discoverer and extension, what it does basically is if there are any keywords like secret, API endpoint, password, username, email, what else? Just basically any sensitive information stored on the application, whether it be in the JS file or any file at all. Sensitive discoverer is going to pull it up for you, so you could also use that. So let's just, I think we've been sending traffic. Okay, yeah, so our Foxy process has been on, so we've been sending traffic. So let's analyze our HTTP history and see what the sensitive discoverer has pulled for us so far. So um has put for us so far. So if we come here, just analyze the HTTP history. So basically, let's do let's see. Oh, this was when we went to GitHub. This was when we went to GitHub. I'm trying to look for the application itself. But basically on this side, you could see AWS 3 buckets, Azure Blob, AWS 3 buckets, Azure Blob. So it's basically mapping out. So in those files, it's actually finding maybe keywords that match the description of maybe a leaked credential or an exposed hidden endpoint. When it maps that out, it saves it here, right? Then you can add them, go and analyze. I'm still wondering why. Um, so I want to use my Bob browser. Let's use our Bob browser and let's just see. Um, I want to use my Bob browser. Okay. So HTTP history. Yeah. Yeah. I want to see if we could get uh, JS files. I won't hear JavaScript, JS. Could even search for JS here. 10 matches of JS. Oh, okay. But this is just okay. This I get the gist now. Right. So analyze. Um I don't it's not pulling anything from here. But the main focus of why we are coming to Bob is that you know you could use the GS link finder, and one way you could install it, you can come to your extension, your B app store, and so Bob JS. Let me search for link finder. Oh, maybe because I've installed okay. JS link finder. Yeah, so this is it. So JS link finder. So it maps out all the JS files for the application as well. So that's like, we've explained three things now on, let me switch to, we've explained three things now on how you could map out, JS files on a particular application. From the dev tools, you could use wayback URLs or getter URLs, to pull all the JS file for that application, on the internet. You could also use, JS link finder on Bob Suite. When you load up the application, it's going to pull all the JS files for that particular application as well, right? Then your job is to then analyze, right? Your job is to, analyze the different JS files that have been found, and see if you could get, leaked credentials, secret keys, expose internal maybe endpoint, you know, the list is endless, right? So, but the main thing you should understand is that on any engagement that you are on, you should not be quick to give up or move on without actually analyzing the JS files for that particular application, right? Now, I think the last thing I want to show before um the last thing I want to show is the last thing I want to show would be using because there was a script I wrote just to see if we could pull the sensitive information from let's see. Okay, so dot slash gsload.sh. So I wrote this script just to see when we've gathered the individual GS files, how we can then, you know, get all the sensitive informations from it without even necessarily having to go through the whole hassle of um analyzing or going through all the GS files, one by one. So GS, so let's just see GS little sh, then let's give it gal, then the base URL. The base URL is this, the base URL is this, then our output directory, I think is going to. So basically what is the tool does? So basically I wrote this tool using, AI, and basically what the tool is going to do is, we had 9 files that were being downloaded. Now, nine, when we use gal, we had 9 JS files, right? So it's going to pull those 9 JS files and run through those JS files independently and search for those sensitive keywords that we spoke about: API endpoint, credentials, password, email, username. The list is endless. So it's going to do all that, then store it in a finding file. it's going to do all that, then store it in a finding file. So cd findings, cd findings. Oh, okay, cdgs. So cd findings. So we have um different text file. So if it was to find API endpoint, is going to store it here. If you're to find, S3 bucket list on the application, store it here. So depending on, the sensitive information you find, it's just going to store it there, right? There might be other ways. It's just going to store it there, right? You I know that there might be other tools you could use to pull JS files. This is just like a beginner introduction to, mapping out JS files, right? So you could also do your own research to see, if there are other methods or there are other ways, to mapping out JS files. I'm going to be dropping another video, and in that video, I'm going to be walking you through how I was visually stuck on an engagement, and how I used, you know, how I used the information I analyzed from the JS file, to compromise the application and bump my findings from a low or even a medium to a critical. Thank you. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Also let me know in the comment section other techniques that you can use or that you are using as a hunter to map out GS files. See you in the next one.